They say justice is blind, but on a sweltering Tuesday in Macon, Georgia, justice didn't just turn a blind eye. It pulled the trigger. When Sergeant Harlan Reed stepped out of his cruiser, he saw an easy target. A 72-year-old woman armed with nothing but a gardening trowel. He thought he was the predator. He thought he held all the cards, but he made one fatal miscalculation. He didn't check who was coming down the driveway. He didn't know that the woman he was about to execute had a son who didn't call the police for help because he was the kind of man the police called when the world was falling apart. This isn't just a story about tragedy. It's a story about what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. And the ending? You won't see it coming. The heat in Macon, Georgia, has a way of settling on your skin like a wet wool blanket. It was an afternoon where the air was so thick you had to chew it before you breathe it. Eula May Harper didn't mind the heat, though. She had lived in the small clapboard house on Elm Street for 43 years. She had raised 3 children here, buried a husband here, and now she was tending to her babies. A row of blue hydrangeas that were the envy of the entire neighborhood. Eula was 72. Her movements were slow, deliberate, and full of a grace that only comes with age. She wore a floral print dress that had seen better decades and a wide-brimmed straw hat to keep the relentless sun off her face. In her gloved hand, she held a small, rusted, gardening trowel, digging shallow holes for the fertilizer she meticulously mixed herself. The neighborhood was quiet. Most people were inside, hiding in the air conditioning. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic from the interstate and the rhythmic shuck-shuck of Eula's trowel turning the earth. Then the silence broke. A police cruiser, black and white with the aggressive block lettering of the Macon Police Department, rolled slowly down Elm Street. It didn't pass by. It slowed to a crawl in front of Eula's house, the tires crunching menacingly on the loose gravel near the curb. Inside the car sat Sergeant Harlan Reed. Reed was a man who wore his badge like a crown and his gun like a scepter. He had been on the force for 15 years, and his file was a thick stack of justified complaints. Excessive force, racial profiling, verbal abuse. He was the kind of cop who looked for trouble where there was peace. Beside him was Officer Nolan Hayes, a rookie with only 6 months on the job. Hayes was 23, fresh-faced, and still believed in the motto written on the side of the door: to protect and serve. "Look at that," Reed muttered, chewing on a toothpick. He nodded toward Eula. Hayes squinted. "Look at what, Sarge? It's just an old lady gardening." "Loitering," Reed said, his voice flat. "She's in her own yard," Hayes countered, nervously tapping the steering wheel. "Is she?" Reed shifted the car into park. "We got a call about a suspicious person in the area. Fits the description." "The description was a 6-foot male in a hoodie, Sarge," Hayes said, his stomach tightening. "Descriptions are fluid, Hayes. You learn that with experience. Now watch and learn." Reed kicked his door open. The sound was sharp, aggressive. He stepped out, adjusting his belt, his hand resting instinctively near his holster. He didn't walk. He swaggered up the driveway. "Hey, you!" Reed barked. Eula didn't hear him at first. Her hearing aid was turned down low to dampen the roar of the cicadas. She continued digging. "I said, hey!" Reed shouted louder, stepping onto the grass. Eula started. She turned slowly, her eyes wide with confusion behind her thick glasses. She saw the uniform, the badge, and the scowl. She instinctively smiled, a reflex of a generation taught to show deference to authority to survive. "Good afternoon, officer," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Can I help you?" "Drop the weapon," Reed commanded, pointing at the trowel. Eula looked at the small shovel in her hand. "This? Baby, I'm just tending my flowers. I live right here. I didn't ask for your life story. I said, drop the weapon and step away from the bushes now. Reed's hand unsnapped the retention strap of his service weapon. Hayes had exited the car now, rounding the hood. Sarge, come on. It's a trowel. She's older than my grandma. Shut up, Hayes, Reed hissed without looking back. He took another step toward Eula. You deaf? Put it down. Eula, confused and frightened by the aggression coming from a man she had never met, took a step back. Officer, I don't understand. I'm Eula May. Everyone knows me. I'm just... She's resisting, Reed shouted, mostly for the benefit of the body camera he hadn't yet activated. Drop it, or I will light you up. I'm putting it down, Eula stammered. She bent her knees to place the trowel on the grass. To Reed, the movement looked wrong. Or maybe he just wanted it to look wrong. Maybe the heat had made him irritable. Maybe he just hated the way she looked at him. Not with fear, but with pity. She's lunging, Reed yelled. Sarge, no, Hayes screamed, reaching out. It happened in a blur. But for Eula, time seemed to freeze. She saw the black metal of the gun rise. She saw the sun glint off the barrel. She didn't think of her life. She thought of the peach cobbler sitting on the counter inside, cooling for her son. He was coming home today. He promised. Pop, pop. 2 shots. They didn't sound like they do in the movies. They sounded like a staple gun slamming into dry wood. Eula May Harper crumpled. She fell backward into her hydrangeas, crushing the blue blooms she had nurtured for so long. The bright floral dress began to stain dark red across the chest. Silence rushed back into the neighborhood, heavier than before. Hayes stood frozen near the cruiser, his hands on his head, his mouth open in a silent scream. Reed stood over Eula, his gun still drawn, his chest heaving with an adrenaline rush that felt sickeningly like triumph. Suspect down, Reed said, his voice shaky but defiant. She had a weapon. You saw it, Hayes. She lunged. Hayes stared at the small, rusty gardening tool lying in the grass, 3 feet away from Eula's hand. He looked at the elderly woman, gasping for air, her eyes staring up at the harsh sun, fading. She was gardening, Sarge, Hayes whispered, horror dawning on him. You just killed her. Call it in, Reed snapped, holstering his weapon and looking around to see if any neighbors had emerged. Officer needs assistance. Suspect down. Ambulance now. But before Hayes could reach for his radio, a low, guttural roar began to vibrate the asphalt of Elm Street. It wasn't a siren. It was the sound of a high-performance engine, a customized V8 approaching fast. A matte black Ford F-150 Raptor tore around the corner. It didn't slow down. It mounted the curb, crushing the mailbox, and screeched to a halt in the middle of the lawn, just yards from where Reed stood. The dust settled. The driver's side door opened. Step by step, a pair of tan tactical boots hit the grass. Then dark cargo pants, a tight black t-shirt that struggled to contain the muscle beneath it. Darius Kane Harper stood up. He was 6 feet 4 inches, built like a fortress, with skin the color of deep mahogany and eyes that looked like they had seen the end of the world and survived it. He was a Tier 1 operator, Delta Force, recently returned from a deployment in a place the government wouldn't admit exists. He had come home to surprise his mother. He had come for the peach cobbler. Darius didn't scream. He didn't run. He stood by his truck, his eyes scanning the scene with the terrifying computer-like precision of a man trained to process threat environments in milliseconds. Target 1. Officer near the car, young, panic in eyes, holstered weapon, non-threat. Target 2. Sergeant standing over the body, hand hovering near weapon, Aggressive posture, primary threat. The asset. Eula May Harper. Supine. 2 thoracic wounds. Agonal breathing. Darius's world narrowed down to a single point of focus. The bag of gifts he was holding dropped from his hand. It hit the grass with a soft thud. Reed saw the man. He saw the size of him. He saw the way Darius stood, relaxed yet coiled, like a viper waiting to strike. Reed's hand went back to his gun. "Stay back," Reed yelled, his voice cracking. "Police business. Back away." Darius didn't speak. He began to walk. He moved with a fluidity that defied his size. He ignored Reed's command. He ignored the gun pointing at him. He walked straight past Reed as if the officer were a ghost, kneeling beside his mother. "Mama," Darius whispered, his voice breaking the terrifying calm. He pressed his massive hands over the wounds, applying pressure, his movements efficient, practiced, desperate. Ula's eyes fluttered. She looked up, her vision blurring. "Darius!" she wheezed, blood bubbling at the corner of her mouth. "You made it!" "I'm here, Mama. I'm here," Darius said, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. "Stay with me. You hear me? That's an order, Eula May. Stay with me." "He hurt my flowers, Darius," she whispered, and then her eyes fixed on the sky. The tension left her body. The chest stopped rising. Darius froze. He checked her pulse. Nothing. He checked again. Nothing. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of heat or shock. It was the silence of a vacuum before an explosion. Darius slowly removed his hands from his mother's chest. They were coated in her blood. He looked at them. Then he stood up. He turned to face Reed. Reed had his gun raised again, aiming at Darius's chest. "I told you to step back. Get on the ground now." Darius looked at the gun. Then he looked at Reed's eyes. "You didn't just kill an old woman," Darius said. His voice was low, a rumble of tectonic plates shifting. "You just declared war." "Get on the ground!" Reed screamed, his finger tightening on the trigger. Darius took a step forward. "Shoot me," he said calmly. "But you better make sure the first one kills me, because if I'm still standing, I'm going to tear you apart." Reed wavered. He had bullied teenagers, drunks, and scared shoplifters. He had never looked into the eyes of a man who hunted terrorists for a living. The fear that spiked in Reed's chest was primal. "Hayes, cover him!" Reed yelled, but Hayes was vomiting in the bushes. Darius took another step. Reed fired. The bullet struck Darius in the left shoulder. It was a flesh wound, grazing the deltoid, tearing through the black cotton of his shirt. Most men would have fallen. Most men would have grabbed the wound and screamed. Darius Harper simply flinched, his body absorbing the kinetic energy like a stone wall absorbs a pebble. He didn't look at the wound. He didn't stop. The shot seemed to flip a switch inside him. The sun was gone. Kane had taken the wheel. Before Reed could realign his aim for a second shot, Darius closed the gap. He moved faster than a man that size should be physically capable of moving. He was inside Reed's guard in a heartbeat. With his right hand, the one not bleeding, Darius grabbed the barrel of Reed's service pistol. The heat of the just-fired weapon sizzled against his palm, but he didn't flinch. With a sharp, practiced twist, he wrenched the gun from the officer's grip, breaking Reed's trigger finger in the process. Reed screamed, a high-pitched, pathetic sound. Darius didn't use the gun. He ejected the magazine, racked the slide to clear the chamber, and tossed the weapon onto the roof of the neighbor's house in one fluid motion. Then he grabbed Reed by the throat. He lifted the 200-pound officer off the ground. Reed's boots kicked uselessly at the air. He clawed at Darius's forearm, but it was like clawing at steel rebar. "Please," Reed choked out, his face turning purple. "Please." Darius brought Reed's face close to his own. "She was gardening," Darius whispered, the veins in his neck bulging. "She was gardening." "I thought you didn't think," Darius snarled. He tightened his grip. The lights in Reed's eyes began to dim. "Freeze, police, drop him." Sirens were wailing now. The cavalry had arrived. 4 more cruisers skidded to a halt, blocking the street. Officers poured out, guns drawn, shouting contradictory commands. "Drop him or we fire." Darius looked at the wall of guns pointed at him. He looked at Reed, dangling in his grip, consciousness fading. He looked at his mother's body lying in the crushed hydrangeas. If he snapped Reed's neck now, they would kill him. He wouldn't be able to bury his mother. He wouldn't be able to ensure the truth came out. With a roar of frustration, Darius threw Reed. He didn't just drop him. He hurled him. Reed flew 10 feet through the air and slammed into the side of his own police cruiser, crumpling to the pavement in a heap of bruised ego and broken ribs. Darius slowly raised his hands. His left arm was dripping blood, pooling at his elbow. "On your knees now." Darius knelt. He didn't look at the officers. He kept his eyes on his mother. They swarmed him. 5 officers piled onto his back, driving knees into his spine, forcing his face into the dirt. The same dirt his mother had been tending moments ago. They cuffed him with 2 sets of handcuffs because his shoulders were too broad for one. "You're done, dirtbag," one officer spat in his ear. "Assaulting an officer, attempted murder? You're never seeing daylight again." They hauled him up. As they dragged him toward a cruiser, he locked eyes with Officer Hayes, who was wiping vomit from his mouth. "Tell the truth," Darius said to the rookie, his voice carrying over the sirens. "Save your soul, kid. Tell the truth." Hayes looked away. The interrogation room. Hours later. Darius sat in a metal chair in interview room B at the 4th precinct. He had refused medical attention for his shoulder. The blood had dried, stiffening his shirt. He sat in perfect silence, staring at the 2-way mirror. He knew who was behind it. He knew the game. The door opened. Enter Detective Vaughn Landry and Captain Langford Pierce. Pierce was the precinct commander, a man more concerned with politics and pension funds than justice. "Mr. Harper," Captain Pierce said, sitting down and opening a file. "Or should I call you Darius?" "It doesn't matter what you call me," Darius said calmly. "I want to make a phone call." "You're in a lot of trouble, son." Pierce sighed, playing the sympathetic uncle. "You attacked a decorated sergeant. You're looking at 20 years. Easy. We found the weapon your mother was holding. The trowel. Reed says she sharpened it, says she came at him like a maniac." Darius's jaw tightened, but he remained stoic. "A sharpened trowel. That's the story." "It's what the report says," Pierce shrugged, "and we have a witness. Officer Hayes corroborates the story." Darius closed his eyes for a second. The kid had folded. "Here's the deal," Pierce continued. "We know you're military. We respect that. We don't want to ruin a vet's life. You plead out to aggravated assault. We drop the attempted murder charge. You do 5 years, maybe out in 3 with good behavior. We bury this. Everyone moves on." Darius opened his eyes. They were cold. "You think you can bury this?" "It's already buried," Detective Landry interjected, sneering. "Who are you? Just another angry guy from the wrong side of the tracks who couldn't handle his temper. The media won't care. Crazed vet axes hero cop. That's the headline." Darius leaned forward, the handcuffs straining. I want my phone call. Who you gonna call? Landry laughed. A public defender? No, Darius said. I have a specific number. By law, you have to give it to me. Pierce sighed. Fine. Give him the phone. Let him call his mama. Oh, wait. The room went deadly silent. Landry snickered. Darius stared at Pierce. He burned the man's face into his memory. Remember that joke? Darius said softly. Remember you laughed. Landry slid a phone across the table. Darius picked it up. He didn't dial a lawyer. He didn't dial a family member. He dialed a number that was 13 digits long, an encrypted satellite line that bypassed the local switchboards entirely. It rang once. Secure line. Identify, a computerized voice said. Sierra 117 or Code Delta X-Ray 9er, requesting immediate extraction and legal intervention. Situation critical. Code black. There was a pause. Then a human voice came on the line, a voice that commanded entire fleets. Kane, this is General Harlan. We thought you were on leave. What's your status? I'm in handcuffs, General. My mother is dead, executed by local law enforcement. They are fabricating evidence. I need the team. Where are you? Smuxenpede, 4th Precinct. Sit tight, son. The General's voice turned to steel. Do not say another word. The cavalry is coming, and Kane, give them hell. Darius hung up the phone and looked at Captain Pierce. You have about 30 minutes, Darius said. 30 minutes for what? Pierce asked, confused by the strange phone call. To resign? Captain Pierce looked at his watch. Minutes had passed. He smirked, leaning back in his creaking office chair, the springs groaning under his weight. Well, Mr. Harper, Pierce said, his tone dripping with condescension. Your 30 minutes are up. No cavalry, no black helicopters, just you, me, and a long bus ride to the state penitentiary. Detective Landry chuckled, tapping his pen on the metal table. Maybe his general got stuck in traffic. Darius didn't blink. He didn't look at the clock. He looked at the vibration in the glass of water sitting on the table. Ripples, concentric circles starting to form, growing more violent by the second. It's not traffic, Darius said softly. It's arrival. Outside, the atmosphere of the 4th Precinct shifted instantly. The front desk sergeant, a portly man named Reynolds, dropped his coffee mug. It shattered, but the sound was swallowed by a deafening roar that shook the ceiling tiles loose. Through the front glass doors, Reynolds saw them. 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans with government plates screeched to a halt in a V formation, blocking the main entrance. Behind them, a massive Bearcat armored vehicle crushed the precinct's flower bed. But it wasn't the vehicles that made Reynolds' blood run cold. It was the men. 12 operators spilled out of the Suburbans. They weren't wearing standard SWAT gear. They wore multicam trousers, rolled-up sleeves revealing tactical watches and scars, and plate carriers with no agency identifiers, just American flag patches. They moved with a terrifying fluid synchronization, weapons at the low ready. Leading them was a man in a sharp gray suit that couldn't hide the military bearing beneath it. This was Colonel Barrett Klein, retired, now a high-level liaison for the Department of Justice, specializing in military assets. Reynolds scrambled for his radio. We have a situation. Armed men out for... The front doors exploded inward. Not from a bomb, but from the sheer force of the entry team breaching the lock. Federal agents. Nobody move. Hands where we can see them. The precinct lobby turned into chaos. Local cops, used to being the bullies, froze. They were outgunned, outmaneuvered, and outclassed. In the interrogation room, Pierce jumped to his feet as the commotion penetrated the soundproof walls. What the hell is going on out there? He reached for the door handle. It flew open before he could touch it. The door didn't just open, It was kicked with such precision that the lock mechanism disintegrated. Captain Pierce was thrown back against the wall by the impact. Two operators swept into the room, their suppressed HK 416 rifles scanning the corners. All eyes. Clear left, clear right. Then Colonel Klein stepped in. He looked at Pierce, who was gasping for air, then at Darius. "At ease, Sergeant Major," Klein said to Darius. Darius stood up slowly, the handcuffs still on his wrists. "Took you long enough, Barrett." "Traffic was a bitch," Klein replied dryly. He turned to Pierce. "Captain Pierce, I presume." "Who the hell are you?" Pierce sputtered, trying to regain his composure. "You can't just barge in here. This is a sovereign police station." Klein pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket and slapped it against Pierce's chest. "This is a federal warrant issued by the United States District Court, Southern District of Georgia. It authorizes the immediate transfer of custody of Sergeant Major Darius Harper to federal authorities. It also authorizes the seizure of all digital and physical evidence related to the death of Eula Mae Harper, pursuant to a Department of Justice investigation into civil rights violations. And," Klein paused for effect, "domestic terrorism." "Terrorism?" Landry squeaked from the corner. "It was a shooting, just a shooting." "When you execute the mother of a Tier 1 Delta Force operator who is currently classified as a national security asset," Klein said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "you don't get a murder charge. You get the full weight of the United States government crushing your little kingdom." One of the operators stepped forward and used a pair of heavy bolt cutters to snap the handcuffs off Darius's wrists. Darius rubbed his wrists. He walked over to Pierce. The captain was trembling now. The reality was setting in. This wasn't a local lawyer he could intimidate. This was the endgame. "I told you," Darius said, leaning down so his face was inches from Pierce's. "You should have resigned." "Get him out of here," Klein ordered. "We have work to do. And Pierce? If one file is missing, if 1 second of footage is corrupted, I will personally see to it that you serve your time in Leavenworth." As the team escorted Darius out of the room, he stopped at the door and looked back at Detective Landry. "Where is she?" Darius asked. "Who?" Landry stammered. "My mother. Where is her body?" "County morgue," Landry whispered. Darius nodded. "Do not touch her. Do not perform an autopsy until my independent pathologist arrives. If you cut her open to hide your bullet tracks, I will come back. And next time, I won't be in handcuffs." The war room was set up in a requisitioned conference room at a nearby Marriott hotel. The Delta team didn't trust the local FBI field office. Small towns talked, and they knew the blue wall of silence ran deep. Darius sat at the head of the table. He had showered and changed into fresh clothes, jeans and a black polo, but his eyes were still haunted. He hadn't slept. He wouldn't sleep until Reed was in a cage. "Status report," Darius said, his voice gravelly. "Specialist Adler Moss, a 20-year-old cyber warfare prodigy with messy hair and glasses, spun his laptop around. It's worse than we thought, Top. I hacked the precinct's internal server. They tried to scrub it, but they're amateurs. They used a standard delete function. They didn't overwrite the sectors." "Show me," Darius commanded. "Okay, so here is Sergeant Reed's bodycam log," Moss explained, pointing to a timeline on the screen. "See this gap? The file is listed as corrupted data. But look at the metadata size. It's 1.2 gigabytes. That's not an empty file. That's video." "Can you restore it?" Klein asked, leaning over the table. "Already did." Moss smirked. "But here's the kicker. Reed didn't just try to delete it. He sent a copy to a private email address first. Subject line, got another one. Then he deleted the local copy." The room went silent. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "He kept it as a trophy," Darius said, his voice void of emotion. "It was a statement," not a question. Looks like it, Moss confirmed, and he sent it to a Proton Mail account. We traced the IP. It belongs to a private forum, a Blue Lives extremist message board. Play it, Darius ordered. Top, you don't want to see this, Klein warned gently. Play it. Moss hit the space bar. On the large projector screen, Yola Mae Harper came to life. She was humming a gospel tune, digging in the dirt. The camera jerked as Reed exited the car. The audio kicked in. Reed's aggressive breathing, the gravel crunching. The room watched in horrified silence as Reed escalated the situation for no reason. They watched Eula's confusion. They heard her polite, trembling voice. Baby, I'm just tending my flowers. Then the command. Drop the weapon. They saw Eula lower the trowel. It was clear as day. She was complying. She was putting it on the grass. And then the lunge that never happened. Reed fired. The camera view jerked as the recoil hit. Eula fell. Darius watched his mother die. He didn't look away. He didn't cry. He memorized every frame. He memorized the angle of the sun, the way Reed's shadow fell over her body, the callousness of his voice. She lunged. You saw it, Hayes. The video ended. Darius stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot. His hands were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. That's murder one, Klein said quietly. Premeditated, depraved indifference, we have him. It's not enough, Darius said, turning around. The rookie Hayes in the video, he hesitated. He wanted to stop it. He's an accessory, Klein argued. He stood there. He's the weak link, Darius countered. Reed is a sociopath. He'll lawyer up and claim self-defense. Say the video angle is deceptive. He'll drag this out for years. I want it over now. I need Hayes to flip. How do we get him? We don't, Darius said, grabbing his keys. I do. The Starbucks on 4th and Main. Officer Nolan Hayes sat in the corner booth, staring into a cold cup of coffee. He hadn't been to work in 2 days. He called in sick. He couldn't stop seeing Eula's face. He couldn't stop hearing the sound of the shots. He felt a presence before he saw it. The light seemed to be blocked out. He looked up. Darius Harper slid into the booth opposite him. Hayes jumped, his hand going to his hip, but he wasn't wearing his gun. He was in civilian clothes. He says, "You're out." "I'm out," Darius said, "and you're in. Look, man, I can't talk to you. I can't." "You have a daughter?" Darius said. "Lila, 3 years old, goes to Sunshine Daycare on Pine Street. Cute kid." Hayes' face went pale. "Is that a threat?" "No," Darius said, placing a photo on the table. It was a picture of Eula holding a baby Darius 40 years ago. "It's a comparison. That woman you watched die. She loved me as much as you love Lila." Hayes looked at the photo, his lip trembling. "My team has the video, Nolan." Darius lied or told a half-truth. He didn't say which video. "We recovered the deleted footage. We know she put the trowel down. We know Reed lied." Hayes put his head in his hands. "He said she lunged. He wrote it in the report. If I go against him, you don't understand. The union, the other guys, they'll ruin me. They'll plant drugs in my locker. They'll leave me without backup on a domestic call. If you don't speak," Darius said, leaning in, "you go to prison for accessory to murder. You lose Lila. She grows up knowing her dad watched an old lady get executed and did nothing. Is that the legacy you want?" Hayes began to weep quietly in the crowded coffee shop. "But if you talk," Darius continued, his voice softening, "if you walk into the DA's office with me right now and tell them exactly what happened, you get immunity. You keep your badge, or you turn it in and walk away with your soul intact. I can protect you. My team can relocate you. Reed can't touch you. Hayes looked up, tears streaming down his face. He's a monster. He laughed about it later. He said he cleaned up the trash. Darius felt a surge of rage, so powerful he almost flipped the table, but he held it down. "Write that down," Darius said, sliding a napkin and a pen across the table. "Write it all down. The leak didn't come from the investigation team. It came from Anonymous, or at least that's what the IP address masking suggested. Though Specialist Moss looked particularly tired the next morning. The video of Eula May's death was uploaded to YouTube, Twitter, and every major news outlet simultaneously. It had millions of views. There were thousands of people outside the Macon Police Department. They weren't rioting. They were standing in silence, holding blue hydrangeas. The national media descended like vultures. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they all broadcast live from Elm Street. The narrative Reed had tried to spin, hero cop stops armed attacker, evaporated instantly. The video was undeniable. It showed a cold-blooded execution. The DA's office. District Attorney Lena Forbes was a political animal, but she wasn't stupid. She watched the video in her office, her face pale. She looked at the protesters outside her window. Then she looked at the man sitting across from her. Barrett Sterling, one of the most expensive and feared civil rights attorneys in the country, hired by Darius. "This is indefensible, Lena," Sterling said, smoothing his silk tie. "We are preparing the charges," Forbes said, rubbing her temples. "Not manslaughter," Sterling warned. "First-degree murder and conspiracy for everyone who signed that false report." "That's half the shift," Forbes protested. "Then arrest half the shift," Sterling said coldly. "Or explain to the cameras outside why you're protecting a death squad. The takedown." Sergeant Harlan Reed was at home, packing a bag. He had seen the news. He knew Hayes hadn't shown up for work. He knew the walls were closing in. He threw a stack of cash into a duffel bag. He had a cousin in Mexico. He could make it if he left now. He opened his front door and froze. He expected police cruisers. He expected the flashing blue lights of his brothers in blue coming to take him in gently. Instead, he saw a single matte black Ford F-150 Raptor parked at the end of his driveway. Darius Harper was leaning against the hood, arms crossed. He was alone. Reed reached for his waistband, but he had been stripped of his badge and gun pending the investigation earlier that morning. He was unarmed. "Going somewhere, Harlan?" Darius called out. "Get off my property," Reed yelled, his voice cracking. He looked up and down the street. "Where are the cops?" "They're coming," Darius said, pushing off the truck and walking slowly up the driveway. "But I asked them for 5 minutes. Professional courtesy." Reed backed up, stumbling over his own porch steps. "You touch me and I'll sue. You'll what?" Darius asked, stopping at the bottom of the stairs. "Shoot me? Plant a weapon on me?" Darius took the steps 2 at a time. Reed turned to run back inside, but Darius caught him by the back of his shirt and dragged him down the stairs, throwing him onto the lawn. Reed scrambled backward on the grass, terrified. Don't kill me, please." Darius stood over him, a towering shadow. He looked at the man who had murdered his mother. He thought about snapping his neck. It would be so easy. It would feel so good. But then he heard Eula's voice. "Baby, don't let the hate eat you. You're better than that." Darius unclenched his fists. "I'm not going to kill you, Harlan," Darius said, his voice dripping with disgust. "Death is too easy. You're going to a federal supermax. You're going to be an ex-cop in a prison filled with men you put there. You're going to live a long, miserable life in a concrete box. And every night when the lights go out, you're going to see Eula May Harper." Sirens wailed in the distance. The real police, State troopers and FBI were turning the corner. Darius leaned down one last time. "By the way," he whispered, "the hydrangeas. I replanted them. They're going to bloom beautifully this year. You didn't kill anything that mattered. You just dug your own grave." Reed began to sob as the FBI agents swarmed the lawn, forcing him face down into the dirt. Darius turned his back on the arrest. He walked to his truck, got in, and drove away. He had a funeral to arrange. The funeral of Eula May Harper was not a quiet affair. It was a state funeral in all but name. The small Baptist church on the corner of Elm and Martin Luther King Jr. Drive couldn't hold the crowd. Thousands of people lined the streets. Neighbors, strangers who had seen the video, civil rights leaders, and military personnel from across the country. Inside, the air was thick with grief and the scent of lilies and, fittingly, blue hydrangeas. Darius sat in the front row, his back straight, his face a mask of stone. Beside him sat his unit, 12 men who had faced down warlords and terrorists, now weeping openly for a woman most of them had never met, but whose cobbler they had heard legends about in the deserts of Syria. Reverend Caldwell stood at the pulpit. "We are not here to mourn a victim," he boomed, his voice shaking the stained glass. "We are here to celebrate a matriarch, a queen, a gardener who planted seeds of love in this community for 40 years. And we are here to declare that the harvest is coming." "Amen," the congregation shouted back. Darius walked up to the open casket. Eula looked peaceful. The mortician had done good work covering the wounds, but Darius knew what lay beneath the silk dress. He placed a single, perfect blue hydrangea bloom in her hands. "I kept my promise, Mama," he whispered, his voice cracking for the first time in days. "I came home, and I'm not leaving until the weeds are pulled." He kissed her forehead. It was cold. That coldness settled in his chest, a permanent reminder of why he fought. The trial, months later. The trial of the people versus Harlan Reed began. It was the most watched legal event of the decade. The defense attorney, a slick man named Harlan Voss, tried every trick in the book. He argued stress response. He argued split-second decision-making. He tried to paint Eula as a threat, bringing up a 20-year-old noise complaint against her address as proof of a hostile environment. It was disgusting. It was desperate. But the prosecution had a weapon the defense couldn't counter: Officer Nolan Hayes. Hayes took the stand on the third day. He looked older, tired. He had resigned from the force the day after the arrest. He was working construction now, trying to build a life where he could sleep at night. "Officer Hayes," the prosecutor asked, "in your own words, what was Eula May Harper doing when Sergeant Reed fired his weapon?" The courtroom went silent. Reed stared at Hayes, his eyes burning with hatred. Hayes looked back, unflinching this time. "She was putting down her gardening tool," Hayes said clearly. "She was terrified. She was complying with every order." "Did she lunge?" "No." "Did she threaten Sergeant Reed?" "No." "Why did Sergeant Reed shoot her?" Hayes took a deep breath. "Because he could. Because he was angry. She didn't fear him enough because he saw a target, not a person." The jury, 12 men and women from Macon, didn't need long. They deliberated for 4 hours. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, the courtroom erupted. Darius didn't cheer. He simply closed his eyes and let out a breath he felt he had been holding for half a year. Reed was sentenced to life without parole, plus 20 years for civil rights violations. As he was led away in shackles, he looked back at Darius. Darius met his gaze. He didn't smile. He just nodded once. It is finished. The aftermath. But Darius wasn't done. Justice for Eula wasn't just about punishing one bad cop. It was about fixing the system that created him. Using the settlement money from the city, a record-breaking $25 million wrongful death suit, Darius founded the Eula May Foundation. Its mission was simple: legal defense for victims of police brutality and scholarships for children in Eula's neighborhood. He didn't go back to Delta Force. He retired his commission. "My war's here now," he told General Harlan. Darius bought the house next door to his mother's. He spent his days tending her garden. The hydrangeas grew taller, bluer, more vibrant than ever. They became a symbol. People would stop by just to see them, to leave a card, to stand in silence. One afternoon, a year after the shooting, a young black boy, maybe 10 years old, walked up the driveway. He was holding a small, wilting daisy in a plastic cup. "Mr. Darius?" the boy asked shyly. Darius looked up from his weeding. "Yeah, son. My mama said you know how to make things grow. My flower's dying. Can you help me?" Darius smiled. It was a genuine smile, the first one that reached his eyes since that terrible Tuesday. "I think I can help you with that," Darius said. "Come here. Let me show you how to mix the soil." He looked at the spot where his mother had fallen. The grass had grown back. The earth had healed. Years had passed since the heavy doors of the federal supermax slammed shut on Harlan Reed. Years of seasons changing the leaves on Elm Street, but never fading the defiant, vibrant blue of the hydrangeas that now stretched across the front of the property. The house had become a local monument, a quiet pilgrimage site for those who knew the cost of justice. Darius Kane Harper sat on the wide porch swing he had built with his own hands. The Delta Force operator who had once dismantled insurgencies was now known simply as Mr. Darius to the neighborhood kids. He spent his days fighting a different kind of war, a war against weeds and forgetting. The Eula May Harper Act had passed in Congress just last week, mandating federal oversight for police shootings and ending qualified immunity for gross negligence. It was a victory written in ink. But Darius knew the real victory was in the soil. It was in the peace that had finally settled over Macon. A gray, nondescript sedan turned onto Elm Street, moving hesitantly. It pulled to the curb in front of Darius's house and idled. Darius set his iced tea down, his instincts flaring, but he forced his muscles to relax. A woman stepped out. She was in her early 30s, clutching a large manila envelope like a shield. She walked up the driveway with heavy, reluctant steps. "Mr. Harper," she called out softly. "That's me," Darius said. He didn't stand. "My name is Clara," she said, her voice trembling. "Clara Reed." The name sucked the air right out of the porch. Reed? The name of the monster. Darius's hands clenched into fists, the old rage, the Kane persona, clawing at the back of his mind. "You got a lot of nerve coming here," Darius spat. "I know," Clara whispered, tears welling. "I haven't spoken to him in 10 years. I changed my name. I wanted nothing to do with his hate." Darius saw the pain in her face. She wasn't an enemy. She was collateral damage. He slowly unclenched his fists. "Then why are you here?" "Because he's dying," Clara said. "Pancreatic cancer. The prison doctors say he has days." Darius felt a cold, hard satisfaction. "Good. Tell him I hope it hurts." "I did," Clara nodded, wiping a tear. "But he made me promise to give you this. He said he couldn't die without you seeing it." She held out the envelope. "I don't want his words," Darius said coldly. "It's not just words. Please just take it and I'll never come back." Curiosity, or perhaps the need for finality, won out. Darius stood, his massive frame casting a shadow over her, and took the envelope. Clara turned and walked away without looking back, leaving Darius alone with the ghost of her father. Darius sat back down and tore open the seal. Inside was a folded sheet of legal paper and a small, hard object. He shook it into his palm. It was a rusted metal pin, a cheap, plastic-backed, smiling sun, the kind Sunday schools gave out in the 80s. The paint was chipped. Darius frowned, a vague memory stirring, before unfolding the letter. The handwriting was shaky, written by a dying hand. Darius, I know you hate me. You should. I sit here rotting in this cell, and I know I deserve every second of pain. I am not writing to ask for forgiveness. I have no right. I'm writing because I have to say it before the dark takes me. My lawyer told me to stick to the script. Self-defense. He said if I told the truth, the jury would think I was insane. But you need to know. That day, I didn't stop my car because she looked suspicious. I didn't stop because of a description. I stopped because I knew her. Years ago, I was 10. My name was Harlan. But my dad just called me trash. He was a mean drunk. One night, he came home looking for blood. I ran. It was storming. I hid under a porch on Elm Street, shivering, starving, and terrified. A door opened. A woman came out with a flashlight. She didn't call the cops. She reached out a warm, strong hand. She pulled me out, cleaned the mud off me, and brought me into her kitchen. It smelled like peaches. She gave me a bowl of warm cobbler and wrapped a blanket around me. She told me, "Baby, the world is hard, but you don't have to be. You stay soft. You let the love in." That was your mother, Darius. That was Eula May. She let me sleep on her couch. The next morning, she gave me this pin, the smiling sun. She said, "Whenever it gets dark, look at this and remember the sun is going to rise." I forgot her face. Over the years, the hate, the power, the job, it calloused my soul. I became my father. But that day, when I pointed my gun at her, she looked at my eyes, not the badge, and she smiled. She recognized me. That's why she said, "Baby, baby, I'm just tending my flowers." She wasn't just talking. She was calling me by the name she used that night. I killed the only person who ever showed me unconditional kindness. I killed the woman who saved my life when I was 10. I kept the pin in my pocket for 30 years. It was in my pocket when I shot her. I'm sending it back. It belongs to the light. I belong to the dark. I'm going to hell, Darius. And the worst part isn't the fire. It's knowing that in her final moment, she wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to save me again. Harlan. The world around Darius fell silent. The chirping birds, the distant traffic, it all faded. He looked at the rusted pin in his hand. The smiling sun. He remembered it now. He remembered his mother keeping a box of them in the attic. The irony was so sharp it felt like a physical wound. Eula May hadn't just been a victim. She had been the killer's savior. The man who took her life was a life she had once sustained. Amidst the aggression and the shouting, she hadn't seen a monster. She had seen a lost child. She had tried to reach him with the only weapon she had, love. And Reed, blinded by his own darkness, had destroyed the one person who truly saw him. A single tear rolled down Darius's cheek. "You win, Mama," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You win." He walked down the steps to the garden, past the heavy blue blooms, to the spot where she had fallen. He knelt and dug a small hole in the rich earth. He placed the rusted pin inside. The smiling sun returned to the soil. "Even in the end," Darius said to the flowers, "you were trying to save him." He covered the hole. He stayed there on his knees as the sun finally dipped below the horizon. But for the first time, the darkness didn't feel threatening. It felt peaceful. Darius Harper finally understood. Eula hadn't just grown flowers. She had grown grace in a rocky world, and though she was gone, the roots she planted were deep enough to crack even the hardest concrete. "Rest now, Mama," he whispered. "The garden is growing." Eula May Harper didn't have a weapon. She had a trowel. She didn't have hate. She had a history of love so powerful it could have saved her killer if only he had the eyes to see it. Her son Darius, a warrior trained to destroy, found his greatest victory not in vengeance, but in planting seeds of change in the very soil stained by his mother's blood. This story isn't just about a bad cop or a grieving son. It's a reminder that every interaction carries the weight of a lifetime. Reed didn't just kill an old woman. He killed the only person who had ever shown him mercy. He killed his own chance at redemption. Don't let the world blind you. Don't let power harden you, because in the end, we all return to the same dirt. The only question is, what kind of flowers will grow where you stood? If this story moved you, if you believe that justice should be blind but never heartless, hit that like button. Share this video to keep Eula's memory alive, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that expose the truth and challenge the system. Until next time, stay safe and keep tending your